Asian markets edge higher as investors welcome US President Trump's pro-business agenda. European nations brace for Trump's second term, with only far-right leaders receiving invitations to his inauguration. And we also look at US-Africa relations under a new Trump administration. Hello, I'm Taiba Aydin with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. Donald Trump has been sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. Because of the bitterly cold weather in Washington, his inauguration was held indoors. The first time that's happened in 40 years. But it didn't stop Trump from beginning his presidency with a blizzard of controversial orders. Our North America correspondent John Brain reports.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
A political comeback to end all political comebacks. A year ago, Donald Trump was facing more than 90 criminal charges.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Earlier in the day, he'd been welcomed to the White House by the outgoing President Joe Biden. It was a courtesy that Trump had refused to extend to Biden 4 years ago, falsely claiming the 2020 election had been rigged. The Democrats were determined to show that they accepted the will of the people.
Donald J. Trump.
In his acceptance speech, Trump pledged a new golden age for America.
From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
But although he'd promised a speech promoting unity, he was soon denigrating his opponent's record in office.
We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad.
Donald Trump is beginning his second presidential term in a position of real strength. Having won the popular vote this time, he has a clear mandate from the American public. What's more, the Republican Party control both chambers of Congress, and Trump's grip on that party is firmer than ever.
The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
And Trump seems determined not to waste a moment. In front of 20,000 supporters in the Capitol Arena, he started signing executive orders.
Could you imagine Biden doing this? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Ever the showman, he threw the pens he'd used into the crowd. The next 4 years could be many things, but they're unlikely to be boring. John Brain, TRT World, Washington.
Asia-Pacific markets rose on Tuesday as investors welcomed US President Donald Trump's broad pro-business agenda following his inauguration. Hong Kong's Hang Seng index led gains, advancing 1.12%, while mainland China's CSI 300 rebounded from earlier losses to close 0.39% higher. South Korea's Kospi edged up 0.17%, but the Kosdaq slipped 0.32%, and Australia's S&P ASX 200 climbed by 0.68%. Despite market gains, currency movements reflected caution after President Trump hinted at imposing tariffs on Canada and Mexico within weeks. Shares of Japanese automakers and South Korean battery makers faced pressure, driven by concerns over potential trade disruptions. For more, we're joined by Inky Cho in Kuala Lumpur. He's a financial market strategist at XNES. Good to have you back on TRT World with us. Now, what role do Trump's policies play in shaping Asia-Pacific market performance?
Good morning, Aidan. Thanks for having me today. Well, Trump's policies would reshape the Asia-Pacific market landscape by disrupting established trade patterns, reducing U.S. engagement in multilateral frameworks, and fostering new economic opportunities for the emerging markets. And Trump's coming back to power is mostly tied to the US-China trade war, the America First agenda, and some rising geopolitical risk. And it is basically related to China. So based on this fact, what really matters is figuring out what the future relationship with China is going to look like. And speaking about the Chinese stock market had been doing well recently, hoping that the US-China relationship would get better after the call between Trump and President Xi. But things seems to have cooled off a bit after Trump made some comments about the Panama Canal in his inauguration speech. And his tough stance could really shake things up for the Chinese government and Chinese economy, and also to the Chinese stock market down the line, giving some concerns to the Chinese authorities while they are preparing the full-fledged easing measures.
And how might potential tariffs on Canada and Mexico impact global trade dynamics?
Well, Donald Trump announced that starting next month, he's going to slap a 25 tariffs on both Mexico and Canada. And he said he was doing this because those countries weren't doing enough to stop illegal immigration and some kind of drug problems. And tariffs can really drive up prices on imported stuff, which could spark overall inflation. And this means American households might feel the pinch of the rising prices, and companies that depend on products from Canada and Mexico could also struggle to keep up with global competition because of their higher cost. Especially auto manufacturers that sources parts from across borders might end up facing higher production costs. And plus, tech companies also, which depends on North American supply chains, could struggle to keep up with demand because of rising tariffs on key components. It is also important to consider how this might shake up geopolitical dynamics. And there is a chance that if trade gets disrupted like this, Canada and Mexico might take it as an opportunity to strengthen their trade ties with China, not US, possibly reshaping their geopolitical alliances.
Right, and meanwhile, the dollar has strengthened against a basket of currencies. Can we expect this momentum to continue?
Well, Trump's goal of ending the war could really change things when it comes to geopolitical risks and also with the risk-averse sentiment. And he's made it clear that he wants to wrap up all the conflict and bring peace to places like Ukraine and the Middle East. However, rising tensions around Taiwan could severely disrupt global supply chains, particularly in semiconductors, and increase risk premium for the region, intensifying the uncertainty surrounding the US and China. And in this respect, of course, the dollar has been plummeted today, but due to this kind of risk-averse sentiment and, of course, with the safe asset demand, higher safe asset demand, I think the dollar will see the higher moments from now on.
Okay, Inky Cho, we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, while many world leaders are wary of what Donald Trump's return to the White House could mean for global diplomacy, India sees it as an opportunity. For New Delhi, a second Trump presidency could bring a renewed focus on shared strategic goals, especially when it comes to facing up to China. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump have maintained a close personal relationship since his first presidency. Following Trump's recent election victory, Modi was among the first to congratulate him. The United States views India as a critical partner in countering China's growing influence. India's demographic advantages and expanding technological capabilities position it as an alternative to China in global supply chains, an important goal for Washington. And despite their strong ties, challenges do remain. Trump has previously threatened the BRICS alliance with steep tariffs of up to 100% if they attempt to undermine the dollar's global dominance. India is one of the founding members of the 10 BRICS nations, which now includes China, Russia, South Africa and the UAE. India's continued imports of Russian energy could become a sticking point in bilateral ties, as Washington remains critical of nations maintaining close trade ties with Moscow. Last week, the US Treasury imposed sanctions on Russian oil producers and vessels that have mainly shipped Russian oil to India and China. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is Saurabh Shukla, Editor-in-Chief of News Mobile Asia. Thanks for being with us, Saurabh. Now, we know Trump and Modi have had close relationship. How could a second Trump presidency impact India's strategic and economic relations with the U.S.?
Well, both, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and U.S. President Donald Trump, as you rightly said, enjoy a very good personal chemistry. In fact, I am hearing from my sources here in Washington, D.C., that they're planning a summit meeting which may happen next month between Prime Minister Modi and the U.S. President Donald Trump. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who's here in Washington, D.C. For President Trump's inauguration, in fact, was given an enhanced protocol. He was seated on the first row during the presidential inaugural ceremony. And also he has been meeting a lot of other, cabinet members in the Trump administration. The clear message is that India attaches very high value to this partnership with the US. And President Trump has been someone who's enjoyed a close relationship with Prime Minister Modi. And it remains to be seen how that will translate into real action, because both the leaders want that this relationship should be widened, but as friends, they do have some differences. It remains to be seen how are they going to, settle some of these differences. Taiba?
Now, India has been positioning itself as an alternative to China in global supply chains. What opportunities and challenges would this have for India and the US?
Well, that's true that the US considers India as a strategic pivot when it comes to dealing with China. That will continue to go on. A lot of US companies are now investing in India, whether it's on supply chains or even semiconductors. In fact, companies like Apple have shifted their supply lines to India, and that is going to continue. What Donald Trump is going to expect from India is dollar for dollar. He's someone, I've interacted with him several times. I've interviewed him, and I can tell you he's somebody who's a very astute leader who demands, and in this case, where he wants America first, he will certainly demand something from Prime Minister Modi in ensuring that America's interests are put first. There are more American jobs created. And I believe that this is something is going to be negotiated when the two leaders meet. It's not going to be easy when it comes to some of the issues, but I don't see tariffs and other trade issues undermining this partnership. There is enough and more that India can actually provide to the US in terms of not only as a strategic pivot, but also as a key business opportunity, because a lot of US defense companies are eyeing India as a key strategic market. And I think that basket will be increased. The other part is going to be that India's reliance on Russian oil, that may go down, because Donald Trump will expect India to, rely more on the U.S. Oil. Now that U.S. is planning to drill more, this is what President Trump's policy is going to be. That is where I see some kind of strategic shift by India to ensure they buy less of Russian oil and obviously switch to the U.S. Fuel and the sources coming from the United States. Taiba?
Okay, Saurabh Shukla, Editor-in-Chief of News Mobile Asia. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, as China's influence continues to grow in the Far East, the relationship between Japan and the United States seems more uncertain than ever, a shift made clearer by the recent election cycle. Now, with Donald Trump returning to the White House, the big question is what's next for US-Japan relations? A complex agenda lies ahead for the new leadership. Key challenges include the recent Nippon Steel decision, potential tariff hikes, burden-sharing negotiations, and growing concerns about US leadership in multilateral organizations. All of this is compounded by China's growing expansion, which is reshaping industries in both nations. Economic security is now a central focus in trade decisions. The stakes are high, especially for the US economy, which has long relied on Japanese investors as a lifeline. Japan is the US's sixth largest trade partner, the largest source of foreign direct investment, and the top holder of US Treasury securities, making its economic ties with the US vital. Tensions deepened after President Joe Biden blocked Nippon Steel's $14.9 billion bid to acquire US Steel, one of Japan's largest ever investments in America. The decision frustrated Japan and put US Steel's future, especially in Pittsburgh, in jeopardy. Now all eyes are on Trump to see if he'll reverse the decision and mend strained ties. For more on this, we're joined by David Capra in Osaka. David, firstly, tell us what's been the immediate market reaction in Japan so far?
You know, throughout Asia, we saw a slump in markets after the inauguration of Donald Trump. One reason for that is this fear of tariffs. And I think that one thing that's been made clear is whether or not you're an adversary or an ally, relying on the status quo that existed during this last presidency might not be something so safe to bet on for these next 4 years.
Right, and Japan is the closest US ally in the region. How could trade negotiations under Trump impact that, particularly when it comes to trade tariffs?
Yes, this idea of a trade imbalance between the U.S. and Japan is something that characterized his last presidency. A lot of people characterize Donald Trump as sort of being kind of in the 1980s in the way that he views this relationship between Japan and the U.S. Japan and the U.S. Have very strong bilateral relations. There is indeed a trade imbalance, but Trump trying to rectify this during the last administration of Donald Trump, we saw him form a new trade agreement with Japan. Japan was able to kind of move forward through this through the prowess of Japanese Prime Minister at the time, the late Shinzo Abe. He tread very lightly to kind of maintain this delicate relationship. And his ability to play golf actually played quite a bit in this and being kind of friends with Donald Trump. Whether or not Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is able to continue this, it seems a lot less likely. Another thing that a lot of people are looking at is the U.S.-Japan military alliance. Trump has said for years that there's been not enough paid for Japan for hosting the U.S. forces. There are different perspectives on this within Japan that relies on the U.S. for defense. But the current prime minister, who is the former defense minister of Japan, holds this position that it's actually kind of the U.S. is gaining more from this and using Japan as sort of a large island of giant aircraft carrier, essentially. So navigating this moving forward and how much Japan's going to pay for all of this remains to be known, but there is indeed a lot of uncertainty.
And what's caused tension recently is Biden blocking a proposed merger of Japan's Nippon and US Steel. What approach do you see President Trump taking on this?
That's right. This was, a huge deal that actually was supported by many of workers for US Steel. This would create job growth and protect the jobs that did exist. US Steel has been struggling very hard recently, and this new acquisition was something that was believed to create new jobs and kind of breathe new life into this. But the Biden administration blocked this. And the reason they cited for this was national security concerns. And this left many in Japan absolutely bewildered. I mean, to say that Japan is any sort of security threat to the U.S. Is something that left a lot of people here pretty confused and wondering if they can rely on this relationship moving forward. It's referring to this deal specifically. The potential buyer, Nippon Steel, filed a lawsuit against this injunction blocking this sale that's expected to take place in February or March this year. But not only this deal, but just moving forward in general. Again, I think the message here is whether you're an adversary of the U.S. or an ally, relying on the status quo of things kind of continuing as they have been is not something you can do for the next 4 years. And this is creating a lot of instability in Japan and throughout the Asian region.
All right, David, unfortunately, we will have to leave it there. David Capra there in Osaka, thank you very much for joining us. Now a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. US President Donald Trump has announced the country is leaving the Paris climate deal. He called the agreement unfair and harmful to American industries. Trump plans to expand oil drilling and scrap electric vehicle rules. He also stopped US support for global climate funding. Meanwhile, Trump has also vowed to take back the Panama Canal, alleging that China is operating the international waterway. Panama's president denied interference and called for dialogue, but Trump has not ruled out using military force. Meanwhile, electric car sales in Europe fell by 1.3% last year to 1.99 million. Electric cars made up 13.6% of all sales, down from 14.6% in 2023. Petrol cars were the most popular, with 1 in 3 sold. Overall car sales in Europe rose slightly by 0.9%. The slowdown raises concerns about the shift from petrol to electric cars. Now, there's no tradition for world leaders to attend the inauguration, but who has been invited from Europe has raised a few eyebrows. The prime ministers of Italy and Hungary were invited, as well as French politician Eric Zemmour, British anti-EU populist Nigel Farage, and former Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki. All of them are hard or far-right anti-immigration Trump supporters. Meanwhile, Europe is readying itself for Trump's predictably unpredictable second term, as Paul Hawkins explains.
For the last 4 years, Europe felt it could rely on its American ally when it came to trade and defence. But not anymore. Donald Trump hates the ongoing US-EU trade deficit, which continued to grow during his first term. It means America buys a lot more from the EU than it sells to the EU. Last month, he said he told the European Union to close that deficit by the large-scale purchase of American oil and gas. Otherwise, he'd used what he says is his favourite word.
Tariff, 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 tariffs. Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. Tariffs.
Trump believes US import tariffs, which are basically a tax on imports, are lower than the EU's.
Any questions?
And he may be right. The World Trade Organization says that in 2023, the average US tariff was 3.3%, compared to 5% in the EU. But that rises to 10% when it comes to importing American cars into the European Union, which is why he's threatening the bloc with counter-tariffs, a tactic that, for him, doesn't just apply to trade wars.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. And if Denmark wants to get to a conclusion, but nobody knows if they even have any right, title, or interest. The people are going to probably vote for independence or to come into the United States. But if they did do that, then I would tariff Denmark at a very high level.
On defence spending, he's already putting pressure on Europeans to spend more as a percentage of their overall economic output.
Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. I'm the one that got them to pay 2%.
His reluctance to get the US involved in conflicts is already putting pressure on Europeans to take more of a lead.
Take over, Elon, just take.
And with tech billionaires also getting behind the new Trump administration,
it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram.
There were also reports that the EU had also delayed its competition probes into Apple, Meta and Alphabet, which owns Google. But the EU has denied this.
There haven't been any delays, because I saw that it was reported that it has been slowly or delayed something, but we have the investigations going on.
It's a sign, though, that on technology, as well as trade and defence, Europe will find itself tested again for the next 4 years.
4 more years, could you stand it?
Paul Hawkins, TRT World.
And as Donald Trump starts his second term as President of the United States, many in Africa are reflecting on what his leadership could mean. His first term came with policies and remarks that left a lasting impression. So how will a Trump return shape the continent's future? Ibrahim Shehu has more from Abuja.
Donald Trump never visited the African continent as president. and former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari was one of the few leaders who was invited to the White House in 2018. Even though their talks focus on trade, security, immigration, and the fight against Boko Haram, Trump's reported comments that he had used vulgar language to describe African nations came up.
I'm not sure about, the validity or whether that allegation against the president was true or not. So the best thing for me is to keep quiet.
We didn't discuss it. And you do have some countries that are in very bad shape and very tough places to live in. But we didn't discuss it because the president knows me and he knows where I'm coming from, and I appreciate that.
Others in the business community are hoping that his pro-trade stance will bring new opportunities.
You can't do international trade without American US dollar. And that the dollarizations of our economy has actually affected Nigeria in some way negatively. So it is not easy for us to shift from dollar.
During Trump's first presidency, Nigeria benefited from robust oil exports to America, peaking at over $7 billion in 2017. But under the Biden administration, the push for energy independence has reduced U.S. reliance on Nigerian crude, but U.S.-funded aid programs in healthcare and education also came under scrutiny during Trump's first term, with fears of budget cuts affecting millions.
The advent of Trump and his agenda presents a unique opportunity. It presents a unique opportunity for other major stakeholders in international relations, international geopolitics, to actually step up to the plate. I know China has been doing a lot. I know Russia, too, is trying to do a lot.
Another pressing issue is climate funding. African nations, often on the front lines of climate change, rely heavily on global support. But Trump has been a vocal skeptic of climate initiatives.
The OECD reports, I think 2022, indicated that developed countries should submit to give as much as $100 billion annually to developing countries. So we expect that to actually drop.
Here in Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, Trump's policies are being closely watched, from trade to foreign aid and even immigration. The ripple effects of U.S. decisions are usually deeply felt across communities and industries.
Africans are now bracing for 4 years of shifting U.S.-Africa relations. Ibrahim Show, TRT World, Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.